I'm going to talk a little bit today about outgoingnyc.com, which was a personal project I did to take a look at where the LGBT nightlife had been throughout history in New York City. I'll first of all tell you a little bit about who I am. I work for CarterDB, which is a geospatial database which allows you to put interactive maps on the web very, very easily. I'm their New York City Business Development Manager. I'm also an instructor in the GSAP program, and I teach Tales of the Digital City, which is a project where we're looking at individual blocks in New York City and doing a deep, deep, deep dive into 311 data and open data and anything we can find on the internet, and put those into a nice big project to do some investigation on how you can make open data tell stories. And on that, with these two things together, we have just added a site license for CarterDB for the Columbia, for everybody. So go there and sign up if you want to check out CarterDB. I'll be talking a little bit about it. I'm going to focus more on the project, but if you have questions about CarterDB, I can handle them afterwards, or just let me know. You can find me easily. So first of all, what is Outgoing? Outgoing is a map that stretches from 1859 to now of every LGBT nightlife spot in New York's history. This is an image of it, and I think what we'll do is we're just going to go right there and take a look at it. And then I'll tell you a little bit about my process, why I made it, and why I think it's important to do this. Then we'll talk a little, maybe ask some questions and talk about it a little bit. So here you can see it's basically it's a map. It's an interactive map of all these different locations. These are all the bars that have been in the city from 1859. I might have a hard time reading some of the text on here, so I'll just say it out loud. 1859 to 2015. And it's, as you go in to the map, you can actually explore different neighborhoods. You can zoom into individual places. You can click on a bar itself and find out a little bit more about it. And these are all collected through various sources and means, which I'll go through in a few moments. You can also do geolocation, and this works on your mobile phone really, really nicely. You can actually go to anywhere in the city and find out where you are. There were no gay bars throughout history here that we have found yet inside Columbia, but there's the Gold Rail a little bit south of here. Let's see when that opened and closed. It was, I actually almost know this, 1965 to 1980 approximately, which I'll talk about why I do that. And then just to the right of us here, we've got, this was actually a great area at a certain point, Andres and Jay's. So there you go. So as you're walking around the city, you can go to the site and you can just press the little geolocation button and say like, oh, there was a gay bar here in 1940. And it's kind of fun. I do it all the time. But back to the discussion about it. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about why I made this. It's an interesting project, of course, right? To kind of know about where the history of things are, and dealing with time and space in interactive mapping is kind of hard because there's not really a good way to make sure everything kind of comes up at the right time and is shown properly. So what I'm not the first person to do this, and I'm not the most recent person to do this. The New York Public Library just hired a time and space engineer, Bert, over there, and he's a really wonderful guy, and he's looking really deeply at the how and why of time and data. And so he's going into the collections, and he's going to be mimicking a little bit of what I did, and maybe I mimic him. I don't know, but we're working together now anyway. So going into old books and old yellow pages and old references and anything that the library's been collecting for hundreds of years, not thousands, hundreds of years, and extracting that data and then making it relational so that you can see relationships between, a phone book and police records and all kinds of stuff. So what I'm trying to do here is to reveal a little bit of gay history so that I could better understand myself and understand the relationship of gay people to the rest of society. My career has been mostly in mapping. I went to CCA in California. I was trained as a designer, and I graduated in 2001 after going back. I studied geology for a little while, and that didn't work out. And went back and studied design, and I was the only person doing information and mapping in 2001 because it was so hard. It was really, really hard to do. Esri was kind of just becoming a thing, and it was expensive, and so I did a lot of stuff by hand, and my final thesis was basically a labyrinth, a dirt labyrinth. We didn't use any digital tools except for Illustrator, and we just kind of drew all that by hand. And when I graduated, I went and I worked for Newsweek here in the city, and I ended up getting into a lot of really great projects, working with some people who were very, very skilled and had been doing information graphics and mapping for dozens of years. So I ended up learning from some of the best. Bonnie Scranton, and it was one of them. She worked with Edward Tufte, and so taught me all the little tricks. So this is there's a map of LA showing when the new Geary building was being built, like how excited everybody was about it. This is the one on the bottom left is solving the malaria problem and some new advances in malaria. And on the right is HIV rates in India and how they were tied to truck routes and how they were dealing with that. After that, I worked for Regional Plan Association, which worked with a lot of urban planning issues, and did things like the Governor's Island guidebook. So I dove deep into the city, and all of these were laying a foundation for me to do a lot of the work I'm doing now. And then I went out, I ran my own business called Line Point Path, where I did a whole bunch of different really wonderful pieces. And finally, I ended up working for CartoDB. But in that process, I ended up learning a lot about CartoDB and so this is an open data project that I did called, is for the Sweeten.com, which is a consumer to business contractor renovation assignment. That's like a trust network for contractors and people who want to build out their homes. And so we did a whole bunch of data work and pulled out all of the building permits that had ever been created in New York City, which kind of was the inception of Outgoing for me. For this map was the closest thing to it. And so I did this, and I thought, what else could we map? What else is something that's important to me? And then finally I did this. This was, is Juan here? The one who spoke this morning? No? Okay. He worked on this project with me. This was City Bike called Rudin Center, and they were one of my clients. And Rudin Center is the transportation think tank over at NYU. And they said, hey, we're going to release all of our data, and we want somebody to do something interesting with it. So they asked me to jump in and help out, and we made 48 hours of riding City Bike in New York City. So basically this starts at 12 a.m. on September 17th, and you can see people picking up bikes, and we did basically origin destination. Is it too late? It's actually okay, you can see it. You can see people picking up bikes and dropping them off. And let's fast forward a little bit to 6:30. Watch Penn Station blow up. It's really good. It's kind of amazing. It gives me the chills every time it happens. So those are all New Jersey people coming into New York, picking up city bikes, and riding around town. So we made this in processing, and it's we could only do video because processing is kind of hard to do. To make anything interactive with. So there's that. So you can check that. That's actually on the site if you wanted to check it out even further, but I'm going to move on from that. And finally, 1996, I had actually made a gay guide for San Francisco. One of my friends, when I first entered design school, one of my friends said, hey, there's not a really good gay guide for the city. And gay guides are important for cities, or were more even a decade ago, because it's an orientation device, because it was really, for a long time, it was very dangerous to be gay. And we all kind of know that history just a little bit, maybe, where it was actually, it was illegal to congregate with more than, to have two gay people next to each other in parts of the 60s. And so you really had to be very delicate. And so these structures came out to help people find each other and find places to go out and to be safe. And so there was a long tradition of gay guys that came out. Damron is one of them, and I'll show a whole host of them later. But In 1996, I was approached by this man named Kim who said, I want to make one for San Francisco that's really good that you carry around in your back pocket because it's small and you can just take it with you everywhere. So this, that is about the size of a back pocket. And I designed this with him, and it was a really thrilling experience because it helped identify, basically you were every quarter, you were doing a summary of the gay scene in the city. And so we would pull all these maps out, and at the time, in 1996, the Polk was still a neighborhood that people used as to go out, Union Square, Soma. And so we would go through and we would visit all of the bars every quarter, and we would just kind of verify and make sure they were still open. And now, so I did that, and now I'm here in New York, and there was a period where I was going out a lot because I had a lot of free time for no reason. And so I was going out and visiting, and I was getting into conversations with older gay men specifically, and they were like, oh, things were so much better in the 70s and 80s. And I was like, well, why? And they kind of said, well, it was just more fun, there were more bars, and people were just a little bit freer. And I thought, all right, well, let's go with that. And I decided to get some data on it. So, because I wasn't quite settled with that answer, that it was, because I really do feel like in every generation, this is the 70s, this is the Saint, which was like the biggest, gayest nightclub you've ever heard of. And it was down on 6th and 2nd, and they took basically a movie theater and added a planetarium inside of it, and it projected onto the ceiling, and there was this sea of gays and lesbians just dancing, and for all night long. No alcohol. They didn't actually drink. It was all, there were a lot of club drugs that happened, but it was a mix of sober and club drugs, and it was just to kind of be part of the scene. So I can see, like, talking to people who have been there, they're thrilled that they got to go through it, and I can understand why it would seem like it was a little bit better than now. But I wanted to kind of get more information, and obviously things have changed. This is from the 70s again, and the work that was done by the people in the 70s has led to us having our freedoms now, and it's really important for us to remember that. But then also, if you look at other periods, like this is Provincetown in the 40s, and they are having a great time too. So I kind of feel like there's evidence that the 70s and 80s may have been a big pinnacle of the gay experience for nightlife. It was a massive release after a lot of oppression from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And if you look at the number of bars, it is definitely significant, but I don't think we can say it's better. And Lesbian New York in the 30s was amazing, and Lesbian New York in the late 60s was really, really amazing, down on Bleecker Street. And then if you go back to the 1890s, these are pinups from the 1890s. These are cheesecake photos, basically. Which is really kind of great. So my goals for the project were to look deeply into the gay neighborhoods, present and past, to understand where the things were happening, and to start a conversation about where we were going and sort of where we were in the timeline of the gay experience. And then to collect stories and keep a record, which is frankly the hardest part unless you have a lot of money. So first of all, looking at gay neighborhoods, gay neighborhoods are defined a lot of different ways, and they were created to protect. This is how The Simpsons represents gay neighborhoods, and there are a lot of stereotypes that go with them, which can be fun and can be very dangerous. And it was a level of safety was needed and congregation, and gay neighborhoods tended to gravitate towards where there was lower rent and available space, so that you could actually have a lot of people join in. Oops, sorry. Okay, that was my alarm. And so gay neighborhoods across in different cities are in different places, obviously. New York has Christopher Street, San Francisco has the Castro, Los Angeles has West Hollywood. In every city there's a small congregation center that you can find a hub of gay people. Atlanta has a great one. So many people, over time it's shifted, and the number of bars now is much lower. And people are wondering where the next LGBT neighborhoods in New York City will be. There are predictions for Washington Heights, Bushwick, Rockaway Beach, Jersey City. The bigger question that I have is whether we're just heading towards a different model, and whether people are just sort of incorporating into the rest of the world and not needing the safety that had come with neighborhoods before. So some of the theories behind why maybe gay neighborhoods are dissolving is that cities are becoming more expensive, making it harder to cluster intentionally, so that you can't actually just dive into a place that said, like, this is a gay neighborhood. You can't maybe afford to live there because it's just too hard to break in. Incomes for gays have been traditionally lower, specifically for lesbians, and it's not maybe not possible to actually dive into a neighborhood that's established. Gays are integrating more socially and spatially, so it's maybe more possible to get into any neighborhood and to find a place to live and work. And dating apps are making the dynamic more interesting, making it so that you don't necessarily need the nightlife hubs that you had before, which I have some doubts about, but it remains to be seen. So my big question is, how many bars, clubs, and bathhouses are there now, and how does that compare to previous decades and eras? So if we look at it, let's go to the map again. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit because the screen is a little bit. So we're going to just look at Manhattan. Is that too wonky? There it is. Okay, so if we take the slider here and we look at 1859, you see one bar. That is Faf's. And Faf's was a great little corner location, and I'm sure there were more than this, but I'm still kind of looking to see if I can find them. The city has this on their record for LGBT history. It was made in 1859, and I found evidence that it closed in 1864. And there have been 3 other gay bars that have landed on that spot since. There's Mr. Black and then 2 others. And so there's a little bit of evidence that that's what was happening in 1890. So now if you go a little bit further, if we got to say 1890, let's go 1880 to 1890, 1900. We get more, right? And the way I'm defining whether these are gay bars or not is whether they're called, and there are a couple of different words for them. They're bohemian, they're fairy resorts, there are a lot of different codes that you have to look for. So like if we zoom in now, we can see that the Bleecker area, Bleecker Street, was becoming a big place of congregation. There's Black Rabbit, there's the Slide, which became sort of a sex tourism location, and that means that outsiders who were fairly prudish would come in and they would watch the activities going on at the Slide for their own entertainments because they were kind of not willing to participate themselves, but they wanted to see it in action. And so this became there were actual tours that led through the Black Rabbit and the Slide to help people better understand what it was like to be tawdry. And so then if you look over here, this is the Bowery. This is Columbia and Paresis Hall. This is what gave the Bowery its name of debauchery. And it was quite popular with New Yorkers. And then actually right here is the Greenwich Hotel. Greenwich Hotel was a place where men came into the city and had nowhere. They were fairly anonymous. They had nothing going on. They came in looking for work, and they all ended up gravitating toward each other in this hotel. And what happens when you have a lot of men in a hotel is that eventually some same-sex relationships form. And then you slowly get a neighborhood that comes out about that. The Black Rabbit was actually a lesbian bar. And so this area quickly turned into, and has remained until about the 60s, a really big lesbian central point of action, central point of congregation. So let's move forward a little bit to 1910, or actually let's go to 1900 to 1928. So you can see a whole bunch more open up. We've got Eve's Hangout, which was apparently a great bar. There's a lot written about it. Webster Hall was probably the most popular gay bar in the early part of the 20th century. And it was essentially, there were a lot of drag shows that happened there. And there were some clubs up in Harlem that did the same thing. And it's, who knew, right? Webster Hall was a hub of gay activity. And then if you start going into the 30s to, let's talk about the 60s, you can see that a lot of places are open up, right? And you can also see that there are places, these purple ones are places that are open now still. So in this period, we have some really long-running, now we have some bars that have been running for a very long time. So then once you head into the 60s and 70s, let's go up to 60 to 70, you can see the scale just starts getting much, much bigger. So we're going to back up a little bit here. Let's back up a lot more than that. So this is 1960 to 1970. If we go 1970 to 1980, a lot more dense, right? And then 1980 to 1990, still dense. And then it starts slowing down a little bit because the bars started closing down after the AIDS crisis. There were a lot of, basically the bathhouses were shut down, so some of the dots have disappeared for that reason. The sex clubs were definitely closed down, that opened up in the 70s and 80s. And so then if you go into the 2000s, which I moved here about 2002, and I've seen a lot of bars close, to 2015, you can see that there's a lot less, significantly less. And then if you go to now, I haven't actually updated for a couple of new bars that have opened up, but there we are. So, and this one just closed. The Just Club just closed this last year. So the numbers show that there are fewer bars. Now, what to do with that? Is it possible that bars are changing? Bars are doing different things, or they're serving different purposes. Gay people are now going to straight bars, though that's actually been throughout history. That's been a thing that has happened. The Plaza, the Oak Room, was a gay bar for a little while, and it was one side of the bar was straight, one side of the bar was gay, but it was illegal to be gay in this bar, so the straight people protected. They protected them because they enjoyed the social aspect of it. So it's been a very complex result. So here I've just kind of made it a little easier. This was the old. I turned off the lights on this project about 8 months ago. I turned it from white to black just because I should have seen that in the beginning. So 1960, 1980, and 2015, you can see the difference. So that surge in the 1980 was basically just a lot of freedom. So how did I make this? So the tools are a Google spreadsheet synced to a CartoDB table, and that CartoDB table coded into Leaflet, HTML, CSS, and using a little jQuery for some of the interactivity, and the base map is a Mapbox base map. And it's all stored in a GitHub Pages output. And the initial design, like I was saying, was white, and then I turned the background off. How did I collect the data? Well, so the first thing, the data, I'm actually going to jump ahead to the sources, and then I'm going to come back and show you the sources I used. The first thing I did was I scraped a bunch of books that I had been reading about the topic when I was starting. So I scraped Gay Metropolis, Gay New York, and then Autobiography of an Androgyne, which is a fascinating book. It's basically the story of a fairy, as they were called then, and it's and just all the stories that happened to them in the Bleecker Street area. Really, really fascinating how dangerous it was to live. And then Times Square Red, Times Square Blue, which everyone should read. It's a graphic sex, so just be aware of that. But it's a really, really good book about exactly what happened with the theaters in New York, and how urban planning and changing media consumption changed the sex scene in New York. Especially what happened was that the theaters shifted towards multiplexes at Lincoln Square and Union Square. And so the single film theaters weren't really useful anymore. And they slowly turned to adult theaters. And those were never maintained. They were lower cost. I mean, they basically relied on just people coming in. And they became sort of outlets for sex. And once they started falling apart, it became a huge blight on the area, and lots of things happened and they closed down. And so these 4 books are really amazing references on the entire process of gay life in New York City. And then a little crowdsourcing through Outgoing NYC. Some wonderful people have helped me refine the project, and then some first-person interviews. But I'm going to show you some individual sources right now. So this is 1969 gay scene guide, and then which is terrific, and you can see sort of how the one that I did in 1996 echoes this a little bit without ever having seen it. This is the 1969 New York directory. It's just it's great. It's all just typewritten, and I think only one of them came out. Two more, one from 69, 75. They're beautifully designed. The New York Gay Yellow Pages, Sex Guide to Manhattan, a lot of posters, that full fold-out posters, so you could keep it on a wall in a bar or club, so people could find more. This is the first of the switchboards. So there existed these switchboards in New York City, so you could call in a number when you got here. The number for the lesbian one was 741-2610, no area code. And you could call in and you could say, hey, I'm at the corner of Bleecker and Houston, where's the nearest lesbian club? And they would have these lists of everything that was going on. This is the gay one. And they were updated monthly. So you have in the New York Public Library, you have the guide itself for every year, and then you have the updates, so you can actually gather opening and closing dates from that data. And so I'm actually in the process of doing 2 new ones that I found. And so this is an update. So page 35, add churches, dignity, integrity. The mail stop is at 164 Broadway. Man's Country now has $4 lockers with 6-hour time limit. Great information. And then finally they started getting smaller and smaller and higher quality printing, and frankly lost some of the charm that the old ones had. I want to go back and talk about the process. So basically, when I get one of these, you find the source, you scan it. In the beginning, I was just transcribing it, so I would go through the book. Like Gay New York, I just basically went through and I wrote down. A couple of friends helped me out, like just writing down every location that was mentioned. So just looking for clues. So without OCR, optical character recognition, you go through the photos of a guidebook and log every entry, marking that you've done so. It's just, and you have to be a little bit rigorous, but I'm not very rigorous as a person, so I just do my best. With OCR, you can read the image and then do a ton of cleanup, and I'll show you that process in a second. And you can add cleaned or transcribed information to the spreadsheet. So, and then I sync it, so then I put it into Google Spreadsheet and it syncs in. This is one of the good OCR examples. So you have, in Midtown, you have this list of bars here, and this is what you get. And I clean this up just a tiny little bit, but not much. And so it comes in pretty cleanly. And if you have something like this, you can go very, very quickly. I use Prismo for the Mac. It actually has a Mac and a iOS. So if I find something, I can just go. But then you get this, which is like, this is partially a problem of me taking a picture of the New York Public Library on a table. I had full permission to do it, but I just didn't have the setup to hold the book down, and it was a tiny book with a small pen. So I have this picture, but it can't read it, and so I basically have to go through and hand scribe every one of these pieces. And I have all kinds of people trying to help me with machine learning on this, and I'm like, you can't help it if the original picture is bad. So then that goes into this spreadsheet, which I can show you here. And so from this spreadsheet, let's zoom in a little bit so you can see it. So I have the source. I have whether it's in business or not, which gives it the color on the map. I have the genre, a genre 2, so you have bars, clubs, restaurants, and then I have secondary genres. I had a tertiary, but I didn't keep it. So you have bear bars, neighborhood bars, dance clubs, and then you go into piano bars, and so I just basically identified a bunch of different types and labeled them as that. Then you have the name, location, city, state, full location, which helps us do the geolocation here. I'll show you how I do that. So basically, with Google Spreadsheets, you can add a little macro that helps you code. So I uncoded this one so you can geolocate the cell. So it does that really fast. And that is, it's called geocode. If you look in the Google Spreadsheets extensions, you can see it's called a geocoder or something like that. If you can't find it, just email me. I'll show you where it is. And then who the audience was, gay, mixed, or lesbian. This is the weakest part of the project, and because I wasn't there, so I can't really tell whether a bar was like Sunday nights it was very lesbian, Friday nights it was a lot of trans people. I can't tell, so it makes me insecure looking at that column, basically. And then any public descriptions. This is my editing moment, where I pull quotes out of different. I pull quotes out of different sources and kind of add them in here, or I just little notes that I want to do. Whether or not they were membership bars, membership was important because the mafia owned most of the bars in New York, most of the gay bars in New York City, and there's a lot of history of that. I'm not going to go into it too much just because I don't know that much about it, and I don't want to say anything irresponsible, but the membership bars made it legal to have some of these places, and they also sometimes had to have food. So you would see these weird buffets show up on Sunday afternoons in these really dingy gay bars that nobody really wanted to eat, but they had to have it in order to keep their license. So so then I have year open, year closed confirmed, because the year open and year closed are the hardest thing to find because they weren't really recorded. So some bars you can look in public records and you can see how long it was, but it's not always the case. And then finally, year open and year closed. And I have Mafia owned here, ready to go. Stonewall was actually true. Is it on there? So yeah, so I'm ready to go with labeling things whether they were Mafia owned, because it's just kind of interesting. And then let's see here. So then it syncs to a CartoDB table, and then that renders out on the map. It renders out a table. I work that into the code. Right here, you can see right here. Basically, CartoDB does a great job of pulling into a leaflet instance. And from that, you get 989 locations so far. And I know there are more. I know there are probably about 1,500 to 2,000. And I haven't quite gotten all of the. I actually just got really busy, so I had to kind of hold back. But if anybody wants to help, please let me know. So what's on the map now is locations used in nightlife and after dark, and I focused on after dark to keep it simple for myself, and it was where I was interested. I could expand to LGBT organizations that were open during the day, cafes, and nonprofits and that sort of thing, but that's further down. And anything that supported nightlife, and then events that were of cultural significance, which is becoming more and more the case. So the modern gay bar is really an event that happens once a week or once a month. So what it needs is more sites from the 20s to 60s, images and accompanying materials, bars and clubs that are edge cases. Out in Bushwick, you're having bars that are super mixed. They're very gay and very straight, and it's kind of a great thing to see, which I think might be a sign of how people are changing. Reworking of the genre field. And when I released it, it got a bunch of press. It got on BuzzFeed and Joe My God, which I was pretty happy about. And the reason, I've kind of already gone over this, but I kind of want to open up to questions. But this is the Saint, which was like the best, like really, from what everyone says, the best club in history. So this is the planetarium. And one of the points that I really want to make about this is that what this map was meant to do is to instigate intergenerational interaction. The whole project started with Wally here, who I met at Nowhere Bar in New York, and he's like, you guys have no idea how many places there were. And so we started this conversation, and I kind of built the project right there in my head, and I was like looking for something to do, but I've always had a thing where I love talking to older gay men and women and finding out what they saw, because I came out like right in the middle of the AIDS crisis, actually, and I just never saw what it was like before that. So I kind of had to do, this project was a bit of a reconciling for me, so I could understand better what exactly they saw. And people like Wallace have very much helped me understand it. And we already talked about that. And everyone should be happy that Stonewall and Julius are looking at being landmarked. Julius was the site of the sit-in before Stonewall's riot, and was possibly the more important of the two events, because it was basically, they tried to sit in different places and get arrested, and the final one that they did was in Julius. They kept trying over and over again. It was very much like the Rosa Parks scenario, where they they tried to get this to happen a couple of times, and finally it did. And they were arrested, and it started a big sit-in and a big movement, and that which led to Stonewall a little while later. And lastly, as I've been doing this research, I've been finding out that the apps are not that new an idea. Gay men and gay women have been getting in touch through other means for years. So in the 50s, there were hobby magazines. Sporting Life magazines are the code for gay, and in the back pages you would see classified ads, and it would be for pen pals. And it was so hard to be gay in the 40s, 50s, and 60s after McCarthy that everything went underground. And so then in the 1980s, it was basically print and classifieds for a long time. And then 80s, we had BBS systems and 1-900 numbers. 90s, AOL, Frem, Manhunt. And then in the 2000s, we obviously have all of these things. So the future, this is important. The future involves other projects that I'm seeing happening right now. This is NYC Daddy Map. This is by a friend of mine, Elliot Ramos. He basically took the taxi data and zoomed and basically put it into a database in CartoDB actually, and looked at origin destination of everybody that left the Eagle on 28th Street between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. and looked at where they went. So you can see the distribution of how people go to and from bars. And then also, one of my students who's here, Abdullah, did this, and this is actually the more profound work. that this is better than Outgoing for sure. He took the database that I made, and I don't know if he took it wholly. I think he probably edited it a little bit, and then looked at taxi origin and destinations, and then constructed this neighborhood map of where the gay people are living, leaving bars. So you can see, we can kind of see where people are living. So you've got a lot of Williamsburg, Greenpoint, you've got a lot of Queens, and he's done some demographic analysis on it as well, and it's really, really good work. So this is where the percentage men, percentage women, and that's it. And please ask him about it, because he loves talking about it. So that's it. I have 5 minutes left. So are there any questions I can help with? Yeah.
Question about keeping track of the source of the information.
Yeah.
So was that in the spreadsheet too? Like, so you could go back and say, okay, I learned this from this book.
Yeah. Yes, and it's more complex than that though. So it is the primary source that I used is listed there, but sometimes it shows up in like every source. So like Julius has shown up in every source since 1958. So I use just one so I can reference. That's where I first found it. Yeah, and that's one of the columns, and that source is in the map. I just have it turned off for the moment because I need to reorganize how it's numbered and exposed.
And then if you found like people's personal accounts about that place, are you keying that in somehow to the?
I'm keeping those separately. So pictures and stories and conversations about a place are kept separately. I have this entire. I found one person in the city who has the entire Saint archive. So I have like a ton of data from there, and then Stonewall and Julius. But I'm keeping those sort of in an archive for when I have a little free time.
So it's a fantastic institution. So that process is really nice.
Thanks. It's I've had to drop it a little bit, because I'm kind of busy at CartoDB, but I'm looking for inspiration to get started again. And yeah.
I wanted to know the more recent information, how much, like just the cost of opening and maintaining a business.
Yeah.
How do you think that's impacted more recent data?
So the cost of opening and maintaining bars, from what I understand, affects lesbian bars the most, because bars are very expensive to run, and you battle community boards for almost everything. To get a liquor license in a community board, especially community boards 3 Manhattan and 2 Manhattan, is really, really hard, and it might be part of the reason why the bars are disappearing, because of the process itself. I know that I've spoken to the owners of several bars in the East Village, and they're like, they're after us. And they're not targeting them because they're gay. I've looked into that to see, like, I actually did an analysis on all the bars they rejected, and it's not just gay bars. But it adds a cost that is really unnecessary from what everyone seems to feel, that you have to get a bar approved through so many levels, and then you see some of these bro bars just kind of going up really fast and not having any problems at all. So there's a little bit of corruption, which adds to the cost. But that aside, running a bar is just really expensive. And so if you look at the lesbian bars, they're on the edges of the wealthy areas. There's some in the corners of the West Village. There's one in Tribeca. And they really have a hard time staying open. And if there have been some great articles recently about where the hell are the lesbian bars going in every city. So this is not just exclusive to New York, this issue. Like, the gay bars are disappearing everywhere. And so looking into that issue is kind of important. But to answer your question, I hope I have a little bit. They are very expensive to run. The gay bars are not more expensive to run than straight bars, but they're expensive, and you have to work a little harder to attract, I think. So getting the money in is a little bit harder. Yeah. Of an androgyne? I can, let me zoom in on that one. It's kind of hard to find. So let's go back all the way. Oh, there it is. Let me make it bigger. How's that? Autobiography of an androgyne, and it's Ralph Werther, Worther. It's really fascinating book, and it's the one thing about this project that I would love to do more of is more trans experience and more trans history, and it's really hard to find. I was just reading a book on the way here about about how difficult, how it's just been buried, because a lot of times trans people just never revealed themselves until they were dead, and they found out that people were actually a woman or a man upon death. So it's hard to find a lot of trans history, but I'm looking for the sources for that, and that was one of them. Okay, I think my time's up. Yep. 1 minute. I have time for one more question. Yeah.
So, incredible work. And so, like, you're talking about now about starting a new project. And any advice you would have for, like, the heavy lifting part, the sourcing,
be more organized than I was, or I am. It's like track everything, photograph everything, and then come up with a system. If the spreadsheet thing I did that fairly late. I was kind of coding everything by hand. Google Spreadsheet's great. I would say just be really organized, and then don't be afraid to ask people in archives for more. So like when they say, oh, we have this, I went to the LGBT center and I pulled all of their gay guides they've ever had, and I asked one more time, and I got a whole box that they didn't even know about. So there's, and that gave me like 300 addresses. So it's
like the mechanical part of that, the digitize.
Oh, got it. Photograph them better. Like, make sure you have really nice straight. If you're going to do OCR, nice straight photographs, head on, and in brighter light. But at a certain point, you just deal with the fonts they were using back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, which are not necessarily OCRable. But I kind of found the hand transcribing the most satisfying, because it's just like going to a library and using the Dewey Decimal System. You find something next to it. So I found a lot of the stories and really interesting things just by accident, by going through Gay New York and learning a lot about Gay New York at the process, and then going through the gay guides and just finding out things that weren't necessarily going to go on the map, but I saw them anyway in advertisements. So I guess my biggest piece of advice would just enjoy the process. So, but with digitizing, I use Prismo for OCR. It's been the best one I've found so far, and just be very clean with your photography, and that's it. So I'm Jeff at CarterDB. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm also a Zingbot on Twitter. Let's put that up there one more time, all the way to the end. Oops. So yeah, so you can reach me on Twitter at Zingbot or jeff@carterdb.com, and I'm happy to answer questions. Thanks.